Good morning, happy Friday morning. I hope everyone is doing well, had a peaceful night's sleep, and is up ready to embrace the day. Welcome to my Chillin' Spot Chats. I'm Tracy, and if you've followed me for a while, you know I like to get on just a little early to allow people to get on, to send out the notifications that I'm actually here, and just to get my mind right, get the atmosphere right so that we can have a great conversation today. And today's conversation is going to be on boundaries. And I will say, I am very receptive, very open to when people send me messages or they say, I want to talk about a certain topic. And this actually was something that someone very dear to me actually sent to me and said, I really want to have a conversation about boundaries. And so it went in, did my research, and really have come across with some really good information. I can't wait to share it with you. But while we have a little time, I also like to take this opportunity. I am a big, huge, giant supporter of entrepreneurs and small businesses. If you have a small business, jump in the chat, let me know, send me a text, and I will promote your business on this platform. It's enough money out here for all of us to eat. Okay, and I am not, we all shouldn't be intimidated by seeing someone else shine. So today I want to promote Accessorize 425. She makes jewelry. She made this for me. She makes jewelry, and this is I'm a Delta. So she made this for me, and it's a beautiful bracelet, and I appreciate it. She also sells purses. She can customize earrings and other jewelry pieces for you. So please, after the live chat is over, I will put her information and her website in the box. So please, let's support small businesses and support one another, particularly it's the holidays. And so if you're looking for a gift, Accessorize 425. Okay. Well, good morning. It is 7:05. And again, I want to thank you for joining me today. We are going to have a great conversation about boundaries. Whew. And I know that is something that I have struggled with in my past. Having boundaries, setting boundaries, maintaining boundaries, or even having enough self-discipline on my own to respect and maintain other people's boundaries. Maybe I'm the only one. So what are boundaries? I always like to start with a definition. Boundaries are rules or guidelines to tell others how we want to be treated, what's acceptable and what isn't. And so we all need boundaries. And really the best part about boundaries is setting boundaries shows and demonstrates the best form of self-care. It helps create and regulate it helps create clear guidelines, rules, limits of how you would want others to treat you. It lets people know what's safe, what's acceptable, what's not okay. It honors our needs and wants so that we can be respected and safe. Healthy boundaries are a necessary component for self-care. And so when we don't have self-care, when we don't have those effective boundaries, we are often left feeling depleted, taken for granted. Is anybody else like that? When I didn't have boundaries, I was always drained. I was always tired because I was always constantly doing for someone else, or I was always constantly having to explain myself to other people. And whether it's in our personal relationships, work relationships, poor boundaries may lead to resentment, hurt, anger, and burnout. So boundaries keep us safe. And boundaries is what separates me from you. In other words, when I have healthy boundaries, that's what says I stop here. This is where I end, and then you begin. It separates from me from you. And also boundaries help us focus on what's important. And then it can actually help us have better, clearer relationships because we're creating clear expectations and responsibilities. We're saying, hey, these are my responsibilities in this relationship and these are yours. And so without clear boundaries, the lines are very blurred. Like, you don't know where your responsibility ends and mine begins. And it just, when I was married, again, this isn't a reflection of him, it's more of a reflection of me. I didn't know where I ended and he began because the boundaries were so blurred. And so when we have clear boundaries, we show ourselves and others that we respect ourselves and that our expectations and needs can get met. So why should we set boundaries? Because I know people are like, well, why should I set boundaries? What are the benefits of setting boundaries? Well, there are 6. The first benefit of setting good, healthy boundaries are more compassion. According to Brene Brown, people with strong boundaries are the most compassionate. Does that surprise you? People often think that people who set boundaries are mean or wrong, or somehow know that they are. When you have boundaries, people think, oh, well, you don't like me, you don't love me. No, because I do love you, because I have compassion. I need to set clear boundaries. Oftentimes we will feel guilty when we have to set boundaries because you think it's wrong to ask for what you really need. Let me say that again. We feel guilty when we set boundaries because you often think you don't have a right to ask for what you want or really what you need. Boundaries are not a mean or wrong. It's a kind, respectful way to say what's okay. And what's not okay with you, it sets a clear expectation. So when we have healthy boundaries, it is not mean or wrong, but it allows us to have more compassion. The second reason why we should set boundaries is greater assertiveness. Boundaries are a way of asserting your needs. In order to set boundaries, you need to pay attention to what you're feeling and what you need. Let me say that again, because these are some power. Setting boundaries, you need to pay attention of how you're feeling and what you need. Then you can assertively ask others to treat you in a way that meets your needs. And see, that was also a growth area for me. Good morning, Sharon. Because setting boundaries for me was also requiring me to be assertive. And I know I'm 6'3" and I can come across as being being very assertive, but I'm really not. I'd like for people to, when I say something, respect it, but I wasn't. And here's a like a light bulb moment. It was very hard for me to ask people to respect my boundaries when I wasn't willing to respect my own. Having healthy boundaries really comes from knowing who you are. And as I mentioned, to set boundaries, you have to pay attention to how you feel and what you need. And if you're not constantly checking in with yourself, if you're not constantly saying, do I feel this way, or feel guilty because you have a need and you want somebody to respect that need, then you're never going to be able to set that clear boundary. So yes, second reason why we want to have clear boundaries is it gives us greater assertiveness. Number 3, your needs are met. We all have physical and emotional and spiritual needs, and we deserve to have those needs met. Some of the needs that we have, we meet on our own. Some of them we meet in relationships. But when you speak up and you say what you need, you're most likely to get it. There's an old saying, a closed mouth don't get fed. If you don't say what you need in a relationship, then you're never going to get it. So another reason why we want to have clear boundaries is you will always make sure you get your needs are met. Fourth reason why we want to set clear boundaries and the reason why we want to have clear boundaries is less anger and resentment. Think about what happens when we don't have boundaries. If you're like me, you overcommit, you overspend, you do things that are in direct conflict of your values. You spend precious time on things that aren't that important. You're bending over backwards to please people, situations, things that at the end of the day, they don't feel that same way about you. And then you end up feeling mistreated. Am I the only one out there? Because apparently, that happens to me. And as a result, you feel angry and resentful. You become bitter at that person, that situation, that job, because now you're feeling like they're taking advantage of me. No, they're not taking advantage of you. You just didn't set a clear boundary. You didn't set your foot down and say, this is a boundary for me. And now the person or situation is taking advantage, and now you're just angry and resentful. We can have less anger and resentment when we set limits, speak up for ourselves, and communicate our needs and expectations. We are less likely to feel angry or resentful. Let me know if anything I'm saying about why we need to set boundaries is resonating with you. Jump in the chat, let me know. Because again, these are some areas of growth that I have come across. The fifth reason why we want to set boundaries, why we need to set boundaries, is feeling of peace and safety. Boundaries protect us. They protect us from physical and emotional harm. This includes physical violence, unwanted touching, verbal abuse, and manipulation. So when we are able to communicate and have boundaries, not only does it keep us physically safe, when people may get too close to us, or people are using manipulation or other tools to get what they want from us, but it helps us to set boundaries so that we can feel peace and safe. And you've heard me say this a couple of weeks ago when we talk about some of our core needs. One of our most core needs is to feel safety. And so if we don't feel safe, if we don't feel secure in a relationship, or a situation, that's going to cause us more anxiety. So having a clear boundary helps us have feelings of peace and security. And the last reason why we should, number 6, why we should set boundaries is time and energy to do things that nourish and bring joy to your body, mind, and spirit. As I said before, a total transformation of your body is understanding there's the mind, body, spirit connection. They all work together. And so when we learn how to say no, stop, not gonna go for it, not interested, then you say no to things, to people, situations who drag you down. And you can say yes to spending time with people who fill you up emotionally, that activities that interest you and enjoy, and leads to a happier, healthier self. I used to hang with somebody that used to drink a lot. And when I was depressed, that really was a way to cope. As I got whole and healthy, I just didn't want to hang out anymore. It wasn't that I necessarily didn't like that person. That was no longer a coping mechanism that fit my spirit. So I just didn't want to go and do it anymore. And it didn't make me feel valued. Not to mention the fact there's a lot of money to spend going out and drinking, but it was more of, that wasn't the time or the energy that I wanted to spend. I wanted to spend more time and energy investing in feeling good and not the liquor. And again, that is not a judgment on anybody. That's a reflection on me, that I needed something else to bring me joy and peace to my mind, when really everything I needed was in here. So now that we know the reasons why we should set boundaries, it can be kind of hard to figure out what boundaries you need to set. And so one of the ways to identify boundaries and that what you need to set in the areas of your life is, where are you experiencing problems? Where do you feel like people are not respecting your boundaries? Do you constantly feel exhausted? Do you constantly feel uncomfortable around your coworkers? Or are you resentful at your instructions from your parents? Because each of these problems is telling you lack a boundary in that area. I'll say that again. Each problem that you're experiencing is telling you that you need to have a boundary in that area. And understanding that clearly can help you to clarify the specific boundaries that you may need. And so Sharon Martin, the author of Better Boundaries Workbook and the CBT Workbook for Perfectionism, identifies the 7 types of boundaries you may need to establish. And so I'm going to read the 7 boundaries, and then we're going to get into detail on those. The 7 types of boundaries you may need or to establish are physical boundaries, sexual boundaries, emotional and mental boundaries, spiritual or religious boundaries, financial and materialistic boundaries, time boundaries, and non-negotiable boundaries. Jump in the chat and tell me what you think of those 7 types of boundaries. They're very necessary. And well, let's get into them individually and talk about them. The first one, as I mentioned, was physical boundaries. Physical boundaries protect your space in your body. And that means you just have a right not to be touched. You have privacy to meet your physical needs, such as resting and eating. They tell others how close they can get to you, what kind of physical touch, if any, is okay, and how much privacy you need, and how to behave in your personal space. A physical boundary clearly defines your body and personal space. When someone sits uncomfortably close to you, have you ever had that you're somewhere and somebody comes and they're all up in your space? You're like, get over. Like, what? Why are you so close to me? I don't know you. But when we don't have a clear physical boundary, we allow people to get in our space and then you just move. You don't move, or you just stay there. And then you're uncomfortable because I don't want to say anything. I don't want to be rude. No, this person has invaded your physical space. You should say something. And so an example of that would be if someone sits uncomfortable too close to you, you can say, hey, I need a little more personal space. Or if you have a set rule in your house that tells someone, well, we don't consume alcohol in our house. So no, you can't come over here and drink. Those are examples of physical boundaries. The second one is sexual boundaries. Sexual boundaries protect your right to consent, to ask for what you need sexually, and to be honest with your partners about your partner's sexual history. They define what kind of sexual touch and intimacy you want, how often, when, where, and with whom. And so the examples of a healthy sexual boundary is, I like to be touched like this. Or they have a personal policy, like you have a personal policy that says, I don't have sex on the first date. See, that's a healthy sexual boundary. Okay. Third is emotional or mental boundaries. Emotional boundaries protect your right for you to have your own feelings and thoughts. To have your feelings not be criticized or invalidated, and not to have your feelings stuffed so that you can have somebody else's feelings be more validated than your own. How many of you have done that? I know I've done that. I have stuffed my feelings and did not have an emotional boundary because I was afraid that people would think I wasn't nice, or people would think I was too aggressive because I had a need. And how dare I have a need to be respected and heard? How dare you? Yeah. And so by having an emotional boundary, it allows you to separate your feelings from other people so that you're accountable for your own feelings. Ooh, that's a show. Emotional boundaries allow us to create emotional safety by respecting other people's feelings, not oversharing personal information that's inappropriate for the level of closeness of the relationship. I really want to use an example here in my own personal life, and I will. So I had a friend, and that was a very close confidant to me. And I would say things to that person, and, I would just share because we were close. And it became obvious to me that that person's boundaries didn't extend on this emotional level, because I began to hear the things that I told that person come back to me out of other people's mouth. That I would say something to that person, and people would come back to me saying what I had said to that person. Now you can say, well, that person was just a gossip. And I don't necessarily think that person necessarily was a gossip. But because there was no emotional or mental boundaries, it was okay, it was acceptable. It was seen as acceptable that my feelings could be shared with other people outside of them. And that's why when you set this emotional, mental boundaries, you're saying, listen, I validate my own feelings. I have a right to speak for myself. I have a right to have my own feelings. If I want my feelings shared, then I will share them myself. I don't want them shared via a third person. My boundary says that if I feel a certain way, if I want to express myself, then I have the emotional with fortitude to do it for myself. So I just wanted to share an example of that's what an emotional mental boundary looks like. To say that I'm not responsible for how somebody else feels. I'm responsible for my own. Okay? Jump in. Let me know if you resonate with anything I'm saying. Even if you're watching this after the live series, let me know if this resonates with you. If you're even, if these are some boundaries that you never thought of, or the examples I'm giving are things that you hadn't thought of before. The fourth one is spiritual or religious boundaries. Spiritual boundaries protect your right to believe in what you want, worship as you wish, and practice your spiritual or religious beliefs. Again, I'm a firm believer. I believe in Jesus, but I understand and respect that everybody doesn't worship and share the same belief system I do. So I allow people, I say my high power, and I allow people, because I believe you have a right to worship and practice and believe in what you want to believe in. And so if your boundary says, I'm going to take a moment to pray before we eat, or I go to church by myself because my partner doesn't believe the same things I believe, or we choose to worship in separate buildings or entities. You can do that. But that means you're not compromising what you believe in. There's a difference. Now I want to be clear. There's a difference between compromise and just not being able to blend or meld to come together. Whatever you believe, that's your belief system, and you have a right to believe it. Someone doesn't have the right to come in and say, well, if you don't believe what I believe, then we can't be together. Then that's not love. That's them taking advantage of your boundary. Financial and material boundaries. Financial material boundaries protect your financial resources, your possessions, your right to spend your money as you choose, not to give loans. Let me say that again. Not to give loans or money or your possessions if you don't want to. And the right to be paid back from the people you borrowed the money from or your employer as agreed. That's a financial boundary. If you loan somebody some money, I know people say, well, I don't loan money I can't give away. No, if I loan you some money, it's a loan. I expect it back. Unless I say it's a gift, it's a loan. But having a financial boundary says, I'm not comfortable in giving you this money because I financially can't afford it. Or I can't afford to go out and spend $300 on a trip. I can't afford to do those things because my financial boundaries are for me to be able to pay my bills or whatever it is for yourself. So when people want to borrow money or take out of your lack because you can't give what you don't have, then you have a right to say, I'm not going to loan you any money. Or no, you can't borrow my car. Or no, I'm not going to do what you want me to do financially because it's a boundary breaker for me. So that's number 5. So an active example of that again is I'm on a budget. So I brought my lunch from home and I won't be ordering lunch out today. And please don't borrow my car without asking. Okay. Time boundaries. Time boundaries protect how you spend your time. They protect you from agreeing to do things that you don't want to do. Having people waste your time or being overworked. So again, your boss comes to you, you've already worked a 40-hour week and it's just Thursday, and your boss comes to you and says, well, I need you to work 10 hours. No, that's a time boundary. I have a right to protect how I spend my time. I have a right to protect myself to agreeing to do things I really don't want to do. And that can be not only work, but on personal levels. I have a right to say, I don't want to go hang out. I don't want to do because my time is value. And we've said that, you heard me say this before, time is the one thing we don't ever get back. So you have to be careful with your time. So time boundaries is one of the key things we need to set as well. And the last 7 of the 7 boundaries we may need to set is non-negotiable boundaries. Non-negotiable boundaries are deal breakers. Things that absolutely you must have to feel safe. They include certain types of safety issues, physical violence, like you can't put your hands on me, drug abuse or use, fidelity, any health threatening issues. So, and we all need some non-negotiable boundaries, but we need to be careful that we don't put too many boundaries in this category. If a non-negotiable boundary is going to have any meaning, you must be willing to follow through with it. It is counterproductive to set non-negotiable boundaries that you do not enforce. Let me say that again. It is counterproductive to set non-negotiable boundaries that you do not enforce. Because what happens is if you say this is a deal breaker and then they break it and then you stay in relationship with them, or there's no consequence for the violation of that non-negotiable boundary, that sends a message to the other person. Oh, they didn't mean that. They said it was non-negotiable, but yeah, I did it. So, and we stayed together, or you did this, and all of a sudden now I'm confused why this person or this situation continues to happen. Because once you tell someone something's non-negotiable and then they break it and you stay, you have changed the entire narrative of your relationship, whether it be work, personal, whatever. So again, jump in the chat. Let me know if you're resonating anything I'm saying. So after hearing these type of boundaries, tell me what you think. Have you gained clarity about the boundaries you need to set? And I encourage you to write them down so you can hold yourself accountable. And if you want, like I said, I have notes. As you can tell, I read, I study, and I write down my notes. And if you want me to share them with you, let me know. I can put them together and send them out. But these are the 7 boundaries that we need to have in those different areas. And so the question comes, what happens when people don't respect our boundaries, when they don't respect our time boundaries or our physical boundaries, our spiritual boundaries? Well, what should we do if they don't? Well, the first thing you need to do, if someone has violated one of those boundaries and you have said this is a boundary, communicate your thoughts. Communicate with them. Be honest and respectful when sharing your thoughts. Say, hey, listen, when you did this or when you said this, this bothered me. This was a boundary that I took advantage that I told you about, and you took advantage of it and you ignored it. And and you need to let them know it's not okay. So, and if you've had to take time to gather your thoughts and not really, to put it that so it can be a calm conversation, do that. But you need to communicate how they violate that boundary, and how am I going to say this? You do need to communicate when someone has violated a boundary. Don't let the fear of saying, well, I don't want to have confrontation, be the reason to avoid telling them how you really feel. Because all it's going to do is set a standard to say, this is an issue and you violated it. Okay? Because communication is key. If someone tells you something and you just ignore it, then that's on you. But you have to tell somebody how you feel. Okay? Number 2, never assume or guess someone else's feelings. And so, making assumptions or assuming create a lot of misunderstandings in relationships. So when someone has violated a boundary, when you communicate with them, go in with them to find out, so what was unclear about this boundary? What did I say that made you feel like that you could continue to engage in this behavior once I said this was a boundary of mine? And you may find out there's just miscommunication. This person didn't understand the boundary, or they were looking for because every boundary has an end point. And so maybe they thought they had a little bit more room, but communicate effectively and let them know, and so they won't make an assumption. And that, again, it's important for you to say it so that you get the clarity you need to maintain that boundary. Number 3, take responsibilities for your actions. And see, that people don't like that, but this is true. When someone violates your boundary, there's a responsibility in it for you. Why would you allow someone to continue, and I'm talking to myself too, why would you allow for someone to continuously violate your boundaries? Boundary jumpers is what I used to call them. Just jump all over your boundaries. So you have to take an inventory of your own emotions and feelings to say, well, why am I allowing this person to just keep breaking boundaries with me? What is going on with me that I would allow someone to just keep, even though I've said that this is a boundary, I'm going to continue to allow them to jump over my boundaries? Why am I going to continue to put myself in a position where I feel unsafe? And if someone is, and on the flip side, if someone is telling you, hey, these are boundaries for me, and you just keep breaking it, Well, that's so you have to ask yourself, why am I unwilling to have enough self-discipline to maintain boundaries? That's a big one. Because boundaries really comes down to self-discipline. Why do I need this boundary? Why it's important for me to keep this boundary? And why is it important that I don't respect somebody else's boundaries? Comes down to self-discipline. So again, third way, if someone doesn't respect or hear your boundary, take an inventory. Ask yourself, why am I saying that people have a right to just come all over my boundaries and I don't say anything and I don't take ownership of it? Fourth thing that you can do to make sure when people don't respond to you or respect your boundaries is follow through with what you say. Setting boundaries and not following through allows others to think they can have continuous excuses to overstep your boundaries. And so don't make exceptions to boundaries that you just can't make exceptions. If you say it is imperative for me to respect this boundary, and then you say, well, because I've done this. I've done this numerous times. Well, they didn't mean it. Or I'm making excuses for them. And what I'm sending back to them is, it's okay. Yeah, I said I have boundaries, but it's okay for you just to keep violating my boundaries. Because it's easier to blame the other person for breaking your boundary versus you taking ownership over the fact that I can't maintain it. Let's say that again. It's always easier to blame someone else and say, well, they just won't adhere to my boundaries, versus you stand up and say, no, this is a boundary for me and you can't break it. And I'm not going to allow you to do this to me. Because when you do that, when you say that, that means you have ownership. That means you're taking your power. That means you're saying to yourself and honoring that in yourself, that I need this feeling of safety. And last one is, if people continuously break your boundaries, step 5 is knowing it's time to move on. You can share how you want to be treated in a relationship, but you're not responsible for your partner's feelings or communication. Everyone has the right to be treated with respect and fairness. And if someone cannot respect your boundaries, it just may be time to end the relationship. And that can be with a friend, that can be with a spouse, that can be with a sibling. When someone cannot respect your boundaries, and they're time suckers, they're energy suckers, and they just expect for you to just give and drain from you, yeah, it's time to let that go. Because they're not respecting your boundaries, and you are continuously allowing yourself to be taken advantage of. And then now you're back in the feelings of drain. You're drained and you're resentful and you're angry. So when someone cannot respect your boundaries, yeah, it's just time to move on. And you don't have to do it in anger. You do it in peace and love. But it's not about that other person. It is really about, these boundaries are important to me. This is part of my health. This is how I maintain my safety. And I need to have these boundaries enforced. And if you cannot respect it, I'm not mad. I just have to move on. So let me know what you think about these, the 7 types of boundaries we need to have, the 6 reasons why we need to have them, the 5 things to do if someone doesn't respect your boundaries. Because again, boundaries teach others how to treat us. And I will say that if you don't know how to treat yourself, because again, a lot of everything we talk about each week is really the core foundation is of what do you want for yourself? How much do you love yourself? What do you want from yourself? Is your healing the most important thing for yourself? Because again, I can't tell you what's an important boundary for me. I can't tell you how to love me if I don't love myself. All the work for setting boundaries or anything we talk about every week starts with a commitment to yourself to be the best version of you. Wow, this has been a great, oh my God, I've talked too long. I don't really like to stay on the live chat this long, but it's such a great discussion and we had so many great points. And so I appreciate if you've made it all the way through that, or you're watching it later. Thank you. I hope, again, jump in the chat, let me know how these points or these conversations work. I'm always open and available to hear the feedback. And as always, I like to end with 2 things. Again, one of my favorite books, Bloom and Bear. Love this book. This is something for you to take with you as we Set boundaries. Embrace yourself. Why is it that we see the good in everyone but ourselves? We have patience with strangers, lose sleep over people who don't give us the slightest care about us, and drop everything to help friends and family, yet we always fail to speak life into, believe in, and love ourselves. It is time we give ourselves the encouragement, compassion, and understanding that we give to the world. Forgive yourself for not having the wisdom before you learn the lesson. Leave God with that pain prayer problem you've been giving, and take it out of his hand, and taking out of his hands. Walk in your grace and give glory along the way. You are one of a kind, worthy of the best, and more powerful and important than you ever give yourself credit for. Is it time to accept it and act like it? That's so powerful. You can't give what you don't have, baby. Learn and love and live for yourself. Yes. And lastly, I always give out love notes. I'm going to give 2 love notes real quickly. My first love note is for Lynn Clay. I love you, Lynn. She always checks in on me. She's an amazing person. We've known each other since childhood. She is just, has the most beautiful spirit, and I just love her. And she's just a great person to have in my life. So I'm sending you a love note, Lynn. And the second one is for Charmaine Ray Bell. I've never met her. We're in a shared group together, but she is just so encouraging. And she's always so supportive of me, what I'm doing with Transformation with Tracy, what I'm doing with these Chill Spot chats. So Charmaine Ray Bell, I'm sending you a love note. I appreciate you. Thank you for your continued support of me. And I'm going to come to a close. I appreciate everyone's time today. I hope everyone has an amazing Friday, an amazing weekend, and I look forward to talking to y'all next week. Take care. Bye-bye. If I can learn how to turn it off.